Welcome to Dudley Children's Services First, a Conversation With podcast. Our first guest is a care experienced young person who is here to tell us about her journey through care. From the age of 17 when she first came into care, the challenges of being a mother whilst returning to education, moving into independent living, and now being in her final year at university. Tell us a bit about your life when you were 13.
Okay, so when I was 13, I wasn't in care at that point. I was in secondary school studying for not my GCSEs yet, but prior to my GCSEs.
Were you doing well at school or struggling or?
Yeah, so I was doing relatively okay. I think I was in like pretty much top classes for like maths and science and so on.
And then what was life like outside of school? Was that okay or struggling?
Outside of school, things were a little bit like rocky at home. I think being a teenager can be quite hard anyway. Mm-hmm. So I kind of was a little bit rebellious, but that wasn't picked up by school. Like when I tried to get help like through counselling and so on, that kind of wasn't offered to me as an opportunity because I did well within my grades and I was what people might consider a good student.
And when you were saying you were a little bit rebellious, what kind of things did that amount to?
So I would drink quite a lot. I would dabble with drugs, unprotected sex, kind of just hanging around with the wrong groups and similar things that's entailed with that.
You mentioned that you needed some support. You felt you needed some support when you were about 13. So how did that make you feel when you was kind of denied that support?
Yeah, so when I was denied that support, I think it kind of made me feel like it almost like invalidated my experience or issues. It's hard to see like the reality of things when you're a teenager because of the things are more important to you. So I just think, yeah, it was invalidated and it felt like basically people didn't care about me, which I guess contributed to me carrying on leading the lifestyle that I was leading and doing the things that I was doing because there was no real intervention or support for what was going on. At one point I did actually receive a counsellor, but again it wasn't really like that tailored support that I needed. I was supposed to be getting a drug counsellor at the time, and because I think the waiting list was so long, they ended up giving me just a standard counsellor. I think that's what happened, and I think I did about a month or two of it maybe, and I did like cut down on the drugs at that point. But then after that it was like, well, I don't really see any benefit that I'm getting for this or from it, so there's not much point in me continuing. And I think although it was supposedly like helping me, it didn't help the circumstances I was in. Like I felt like there needed to be some family intervention as opposed to just focusing on me in counselling, because yeah, whilst like cognitive behavioural therapy might have helped, I was still in that environment which wasn't going to be changed and I couldn't do anything about that at the time.
So you said that the kind of support wasn't there. Was that kind of denied by school or parents or other people?
There was one point my parents tried to get counselling for me, and I think the teacher just referred me to like this online counselling, which wasn't really appropriate. It was just like, you know, a teenager having to go on and log on to some sort of website that they don't really know what they're doing. It wasn't useful. And I think at the time my parents wouldn't have been open to do like family therapy either or anything like that.
So if we then move on to when you first came into care, tell us a little about that, how old you were. And
so I had just had my daughter. So me and my daughter went into care together. We'd been through a pretty rough time at that point. I ended up having an internal bleed after having her, so I was quite poorly. And then my daughter also was quite poorly after that as well. What led up to me being in care was basically I was having some difficulties at home, which led up to me not having a place to live, essentially. So at that point, I had my daughter, was basically living in hospital at that point when social services got involved, and we both went into care at our foster parents.
And what age were you at then?
I was 17 at that time.
And your daughter?
My daughter was 3 weeks old.
Okay, could you say a little bit about the complexities of you both having social workers then?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was a bit hard to distinguish between having my own social worker and having a social worker for my daughter, because I think it's hard to separate the two of us kind of when we're in that situation. So sometimes I think things were a little bit blurred in that scenario. Sometimes like you were treated like a parent, and then other times you were kind of treated like a young person in care. So kind of managing that was a little bit hard to wrap my head around, I think, especially because there was a lot we were going through at the time, and kind of like the process of going through care, because we had like different meetings for each of us. So
then I understand you started to think about returning to education.
Yeah, that's right. So I'd had my daughter, I'd had a year out of college. Previously, I was doing A-levels in biology, chemistry and statistics. And then after having my daughter, I kind of gave it some thought. No idea why I chose the subjects that I did, but I decided to go back and restart 2 new A-levels, philosophy and psychology, and then finish my statistics course that I was doing like prior to that, because they married it quite well. Yeah, so at that time, I think it was always the plan that when I had my daughter, I would go back to college and redo my A-levels eventually. But it wasn't very clear how or when I was going to do that. So once things had kind of settled down a bit, everything had been through the courts and we were looking at me moving out, I started planning to go back to college. I can't really remember the reason why I chose the subjects that I did. Probably wanting to understand partially about my own experiences, I think. And I ended up going back and just enjoying all of it, and thankfully I met some great people actually whilst at college, so I had really supportive friends, which was a great help, and having tutors who were really supportive and knowledgeable about my situation. So I think I had a personal tutor who was specifically for children in care at my college, which was really good. Little things that people did for me in college made a big impact to my life, like just understanding if I was late sometimes, and kind of just understanding my situation and adapting my college life to that. Like they give me like Christmas presents at times, which was really nice. And kind of university was like the next stepping stone from there. I moved into my like independent living in my own house with my daughter just when I started college. So at the time I was adjusting to managing living on my own and continuing studying, which was a challenge because I had to do all my house up.
So that was a really difficult time, I would imagine. Was there any professionals who kind of helped and supported you, both returning to education but also moving into your own property?
Yeah, so I think my YPA was quite a useful person to have support me at that moment in time, because obviously the grant that you get when you move into your own place, that helped me like kit up all my house. And luckily my foster family they kept in touch with me after I left care, so they like supported me with something, like they paid for the blinds at my house and stuff like that, which was really kind of them. And it's just little things like that, and having them to go around for dinner and stuff like that. Yeah, so the grant helped, and just having that like support network around me, so I had people to go to whilst I adjusted to like everyday life, living independently.
So is there any tips that you could give other young people who are looking to move into their own place or supported accommodation?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big things is if you need help, it's okay to ask for it, and you should take advantage of the help and the opportunities that are there for you, because it can help you a lot. It might seem small or it might seem not very important, but it can help a lot. Planning for things, so just sitting down and working out like your bills, etc. One of the things that I did was, with being 18, you can get like an overdraft and stuff. So I didn't get an overdraft, so I learnt to live off what I had essentially, so that it didn't get me into any debt and I could manage my finances better and socialise, go out and do things that, you know, with people. You know, it might take a while to find a group of people that you fit in with. I think more so at university than at college, because you kind of have to be with people who you're in your class with for couple of years. So, but yeah, try and go out and socialise and do things that you enjoy. Like, one of the things that I would always do is go out for coffee and just sit in a coffee shop and study. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but yeah, that's something also useful.
You mentioned university there.
Yeah.
We know that statistically care leavers are less likely to go to university than other people who haven't been in care. Was that a difficult decision for you to make, or was that something that you'd always wanted to do, or...?
I'd always wanted to go to university, but I think when I became a parent, I remember going to my personal tutor at the time before having my daughter and being like, I'm not going to be able to go to university and I'm not going to be able to do this and that. And she was like, one of the important things that she said that lots of parents actually go to university and people from different walks of life go to university. So that really opened my eyes to still having that as an option. Even though it seemed like a humongous challenge at that point, it left that opportunity open for me. So
yeah, so it says like that was your personal tutor at college.
Yeah, that's right.
Who supported that and kind of made you think that was a door that was still open.
Yeah,
was there anybody else who supported you on that kind of journey? And
yeah, so again, my YPA really, like, she'd sit down with me and make sure that I'd filled in my forms for like student finance and so on, and like thinking about planning and going to open days and so on, and thinking about really the logistics of like how it was going to work and commuting and so on. Like, I know if you go to university when you're a care leaver, you do get support with housing and various other things. Actually, you get a grant or a bursary, which is split up over the 3 years, which is really useful because when it comes to summer and you're not receiving student finance, got that bit of money to like just help push through the summer. So in regards to like my university experience, I feel like some care leavers don't have, well, just people in general don't have the knowledge about what the process is like getting into university and what it's like once you're there. So the process of getting into university, I think I'd kind of advise to just do something that you're passionate about and kind of maybe think about your career in the future and what area you're really interested or passionate about going into. I think you might even be able to talk to your YPA about these kind of things, and I'm sure there are career advisors and so on. And sometimes you don't know what you want to do, and sometimes I still don't know what I want to do, and I'm in my third year of my degree now at university. But that's okay. You can just choose something and kind of tailor it, or you can even change your degree once you've started. So if you feel like the course that you're on isn't useful, isn't what you expected or isn't what you wanted, then talk to somebody about that and say, look, I think I'd prefer something else, or this isn't for me. I applied for UCAS to get into university. I guess the form filling can be a bit daunting with like a personal statement and so on, but really it's just a chance to like showcase who you are as a person and use your own experiences to your advantage really, and what makes you interested in the course that you want to go on. Other things, I suppose, when you get to university, it's scary. You don't know anybody, it's a big organisation, and things are different to what it is at school and at college. So because it's such a big organisation, basically, it's up to you to go and seek support if you need that support. So at my university, they have wellbeing services to do with counselling. So they have qualified counsellors trained in cognitive behavioural therapy and other types of therapy, and just a general wellbeing service so that you can just talk to somebody, and if your head's all over the place, you can just be like, I need to just talk to somebody and get this out, which has been really useful in my experience at university. There are also financial advisors, so they can point you towards towards like bursaries basically, that or grants that you can apply for to try and up your income whilst you're at university and try and support you, career advisors. So you've always got that thought of, if you don't know what you want to do, or you know what you want to do but you don't know how to get there, they're really useful to help you. Obviously the social life is a big thing at university, and it might not be what you always expect. So I think the way that I can put it is, it might be hard to find a group of people that you really connect with at the beginning of university, but if you just give it time and like try it, eventually you'll find people that have similar interests to you and like who you click with. There's loads of opportunities when you start university on a variety of things, to like societies and job opportunities working within university. So just take all those opportunities that, even if you're not sure you're going to like, just have a go. And even if you don't like it, you can just say, that's not for me. But you tend to find if you take opportunities, more opportunities will come out of that as well. And yeah, be open and honest with like your personal tutor or whatever support you have at university. Make the most of that, because university is kind of what you make out of it. You have all this support and it's up to you to like take advantage of that. So if you're falling behind on work and so on, or you're just having a rubbish time, just go and speak to your personal tutor or well-being or somebody about what you're going through and experiencing. And often you can get like support in one way or another, whether it's like practical support and so on.
In your experience, was there any specific support for care leavers?
There was, I don't think on a personal basis, it was more my personal tutor, who was, luckily in the degree that I'm taking, psychology, everybody's really personable and has good social skills, which isn't always the case across different courses. Like if you're doing engineering, that might be like a different kettle of fish. But in terms of like the actual university services, they're pretty good. And at my university, we have a financial advisor, but specifically for care leavers. So when I managed to have a meeting with her, she was really useful about saying, right, you need to apply for this, you need to apply for that. Have you done this? Has your YPA done this? And it was really useful having somebody with that knowledge of the care system, basically.
So if there's a care leaver who was thinking about going to university but wasn't really sure, or maybe nobody in their family's been to university before,
yeah,
what would your advice?
I'd say, well, if you have an idea about what you want to do, start looking online if you can, or if you don't want to scroll through loads of pages of information, get somebody to sit down with you, who, like a friend or somebody who has similar interests in university, or a parent, guardian, YPA, and just say, this is what I'm interested in, can you help me just sit down and have a look through what I have available and where I might want to go with university, whether you want to stay local or whether you want to go further afield and travel a bit, and just look at your options. Essentially, there's a lot of universities with a lot of different courses, so there's a lot out there that you can take up.
So thinking about the professionals that have been around you since you've been in care, could you talk a little bit about your foster carer?
Yeah, sure. So when I was about to go into foster care, like I said earlier, me and my daughter were both in hospital at the time. And the first time I met my foster carer, she came to visit us in hospital. So I had that opportunity to see who I was going to move in with, a little bit about her, so you could start building that relationship. She was really supportive. We had our ups and downs at times, definitely, which I guess is the case in any family environment, really, or with any relationships that you have. But luckily my foster carer ended up supporting me after I left foster care, and just things like helping me out with childcare, and like if I needed a lift to college and stuff like that, they'd really help me out. One of my foster carers actually helped me to learn to drive as well. So just little things like that, or inviting me round for tea, so I have some company and I'm not always on my own. I think that was really useful, as well as like some financial support. It'd even come around and like do my gardening for me sometimes, so that was I have 2 huge gardens. So well, one huge at the back, it's massive, there's plants everywhere, so just having like little things like that are really helpful, and it shows that like your foster carer cares about you, really. Yeah. And just being able to kind of just sit and listen to you and understand your perspective on things, and about the things that are challenging, about the things that are good and are going well, and just having that relationship really.
Are you still in contact with your foster carers now?
I am, yeah. We still keep in touch. Unfortunately, not as often because of COVID. But yeah, and it's really nice for my daughter to have that kind of experience and perspective of having those people in her life so she can grow up and see kind of where she's came from and have that understanding of things.
You've mentioned your YPA a number of times. So could you tell us some of the times when your YPA has been really supportive and helped you?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the time for me, it's practical, on a practical basis. I think having meetings with your YPA kind of as and when you need them really is really useful. So if I'm having like a bad time and I just need to talk to somebody, I can just ring her and be like, I'm going crazy, or just I need to have a rant about something. As well as one thing is where I started going to counselling and therapy, and she always blocks out like a couple of hours after I've finished my therapy. So I have that person who I can just sit and be with, and like we can grab a coffee and I can either talk or not talk to her about whatever I want. It's just having that somebody there for you to be there with whilst you're like processing everything, and so you don't feel like as alone and rubbish about things. That's one of the things that have been really useful to me, as well as not being judgmental. So kind of understanding your situation and almost having a balanced perspective on things. So understanding like the reality of life and not having kind of like this idealistic view on things. So, and the struggles that you might be going through. I think it's really useful to have a good relationship with your YPA so you can just talk and be honest about things.
So you mentioned there about therapy, and were there any stigma around kind of mental health and kind of opening up about that and asking for support?
Yeah, so definitely there have been some challenges with accessing support for mental health. I think first of all is like the waiting list that you have to be on to actually get that support. That can take a long time, and then actually trying to access that support when you're having like an episode with your mental health. Sometimes you're not able to articulate or say how you feel and what's actually going on, because it's hard to see from that perspective because you're so ingrained into what's going on. So when trying to access that support, it's hard to like communicate with people what's actually happening, and you've got these worries of what judgments are they going to make of you. And if you've been in care, it's like the idea of, if they've got this preconceived idea about me being in care, will they treat me differently based on this? And I think sometimes that can actually happen, and some GPs don't have the in-depth knowledge about mental health that they kind of should have, which could avoid a lot of issues really.
So we know that a lot of care leavers suffer from poor mental health, particularly during COVID. Have you got any kind of coping strategies or tips that you could share?
Yeah, so there's quite a few. I tended to do a bit of meditation, physical exercise, even if it's just a walk around, like just get out the house and get some fresh air. It'd be really useful. Or just sitting and enjoying like a cup of tea or coffee or your favourite drink. Try and keep in contact with people, because sometimes you can isolate yourself when they can just be there to help lift your mood. I know that when I'm feeling bad or I'm having a bad day or so on, like I will make sure that I go to university or I go and see my friends, even if I might not feel like it, because I know that I'm going to feel better afterwards, after like communicating and just having a laugh and with friends. Just really focusing on now and like the next step within the day, not thinking too far forward. So thinking about all the overwhelming things you've got to do, just think about what next and take it one step at a time. Maybe some deep breathing if you're struggling in the moment, and just focus on the fact that you're okay now and that you're going to get where you need to go.
A massive thank you for sharing your journey with us today. I think many care leavers in Dudley will find what you've said very useful. This podcast was presented by myself, Darren Foley, and was edited and produced by Vicky Sylvester Grant.